It's May 24th, 2016, and Gareth Hutch is walking toward his car. The 35-year-old father of one is just going about his day, not knowing that his life will end in a few moments. As he steps closer to his car, two gunmen appear. Without warning, they open fire. The first shot hits him in the chest, the second in his head. Gareth collapses, a few feet away from the car. His young son, Preston, watches in horror, an innocent child forced to witness the execution of his father. This wasn't a random attack. Gareth Hutch, a nephew of the notorious Gerry the Monk Hutch, was caught in the crossfire of a deadly gangland war that by this point had already claimed 6 lives, but would go on to claim many more. His death, at the hands of Kinahan gunmen, was part of a larger retaliation, a direct response to the murder of David Byrne, a key figure in the Kinahan cartel, just months earlier. This wasn't just about turf wars or business rivalries. This was personal. To understand the feud that had claimed Gareth Hutch's life, you need to understand the two families at war, the Hutch family and the Kinahan cartel. The Hutch family, led by Gerry the Monk Hutch, had been a fixture in Dublin's underworld for decades. From the 1980s, they had built their fortune through armed robberies, heists, and illegal smuggling. As their wealth grew, so did their influence, eventually giving rise to a tight-knit criminal empire. While the Hutch crew had begun to diversify into more legitimate business interests by the 2000s, their roots were still deeply planted in the criminal world. On the other side of the war, the Kinahan cartel was an empire built by Christy, Dapper Don, Kinahan. What started as a small-time operation in the 1970s eventually grew into one of Europe's most powerful drug trafficking organizations, with a reach spanning Ireland, the UK, and mainland Europe. By the mid-2000s, their operations were global, with Spain and Dubai serving as hubs for laundering money and running illicit business. When Daniel Kinahan took over leadership, the cartel became ruthless. Unlike the Hutch family, which maintained a more family-oriented, close-knit structure, the Kinahan cartel operated like a corporate empire, with its own hierarchy and precise operations. The Hutch and Kinahan groups were not always enemies. In fact, there were periods of cooperation and overlap. Gary Hutch, Gary Hutch's nephew, moved to Spain after a prison term and became an associate of Daniel Kinahan, effectively working within the Kinahan operation. He was even described as once having been Daniel's right-hand man. By 2014, cracks in the alliance began to show. Tensions reportedly arose over suspicions of betrayal within the ranks. An incident in August 2014 hinted at the storm to come. An ex-boxer named Jamie Moore was shot and wounded in Marbella while training at a gym associated with Daniel Kinahan. It turned out to be a botched hit. Moore was an unintended victim in what was believed to be an attempt on a Kinahan associate, possibly Daniel himself. This shooting in Spain was a precursor. While not officially part of the Hutch-Kinahan feud, it foreshadowed the violent mistrust bubbling beneath the surface. The real trigger, however, came the year after. Most sources agree that the feud truly began on 24 September 2015, when Gary Hutch was murdered in Spain. The circumstances around Gary's death and its aftermath set off the chain of revenge that continues to reverberate. Gary Hutch, 34, was gunned down late morning inside a gated apartment complex in an area of Marbella. A well-known Dublin criminal, Gary had been living in Spain for about 8 years after his release from prison. He had prior convictions for armed robbery. On that day, an assassin cornered Gary at the complex. Unarmed and realizing his fate, Gary reportedly pleaded for his life, but the gunman showed no mercy and shot him dead. Gary's close ties to both families made the fallout explosive. In 2014, he had fallen under suspicion. Kinahan loyalists believed Gary was a rat, an informant for Spanish police. It was later suggested this allegation was false, but in the gangland world, even a rumor can be a death sentence. What makes the murder particularly tragic is that attempts were made to spare Gary's life. Behind the scenes, Gary Hutch, Gary's uncle, negotiated with Daniel Kinahan to resolve the dispute peacefully. According to later court evidence and media reports, a deal was struck. As punishment for Gary's perceived treachery, another Hutch associate would take a bullet in a staged shooting. Incredibly, Gary's own brother Patrick Hutch volunteered to be shot in the leg by Daniel Kinahan, apparently to satisfy the Kinahans' demand for retribution without killing Gary. This bizarre agreement, essentially a sacrificial shooting, did occur. Patrick survived the leg wound. Additionally, the Hutch side reportedly paid €200,000 to the Kinahans as part of this agreement to spare Gary's life. Despite taking the money and staging the punishment shooting, the Kinahan leadership ordered Gary killed anyway. There was speculation that Daniel Kinahan personally ordered the hit after luring Gary with false promises of safety, though officially, Daniel has not been charged. James Quinn, a Dublin criminal and Kinahan associate, was convicted in 2018 for involvement in Gary's killing. Quinn had acted as a lookout and helped the shooter escape. Notably, the Spanish court recognized the murder as part of the Kinahan-Hutch feud. Quinn received a lengthy prison term of 22 years, but the triggerman and those who ordered the job remained at large. In Dublin, Gary Hutch's funeral was a tense, grief-stricken event. The Hutch family publicly claimed they did not want revenge, a message perhaps aimed at de-escalating the situation or avoiding further provocation. But whether or not Gary Hutch wanted revenge at that moment, the wheels of violence were already in motion. The Kinahan side, fearing retaliation, was not about to rest either. Within 2 weeks of Gary's murder, the Kinahans struck at the Hutch family again, this time behind bars. On the 9th of October 2015, Derek Delboy Hutch, Gary's younger brother, was stabbed repeatedly while serving a prison sentence in Dublin's Mountjoy prison. Derek, a hardened criminal himself, survived the attempt on his life. It was later reported that a €10,000 bounty had been placed on him by none other than Christy Kinahan Sr. At this point, late 2015, a sense of dread gripped Dublin's underworld. Everyone knew that Gary Hutch would not let this go unanswered forever. Rumors swirled that the Hutches were plotting revenge on Daniel Kinahan, who had retreated to the safety of his Spanish base. Meanwhile, Kinahan gunmen in Dublin seemed to be proactively targeting anyone linked to the Hutch family, trying to choke off any reprisal before it could happen. This pattern became evident in the next killing of 2015. As the year drew to a close, Darren Kearns, a 33-year-old criminal associate of the Hutch family, was shot dead in front of his wife in Dublin. Kearns had just left a Chinese restaurant on Black Horse Avenue when he was ambushed and killed. Investigators believe Kearns was targeted for a botched assassination on a Kinahan gang member sometime earlier. Like many early feud murders, no one has been charged for Darren Kearns' killing as of the latest reports. If there was any doubt a feud was underway, the bloodletting of 2016 erased it. The new year would see an explosion of violence that shocked Ireland and made international headlines. On the afternoon of the 5th of February 2016, Dublin's Regency Hotel was hosting a boxing weigh-in event for a WBO lightweight title fight. Among the attendees were members of the Kinahan cartel, including Daniel Kinahan himself. Around 2:30 p.m., a group of 4 armed men stormed the hotel, disguised as police in tactical uniforms and carrying AK-47 assault rifles. The gunmen opened fire in a brazen assassination attempt. Panic ensued as people dived for cover. One of the attackers was bizarrely dressed as a woman wearing a wig. Daniel Kinahan narrowly escaped, as he had left the event minutes before the shooting started. However, David Byrne, 34, was shot dead in the attack. Byrne, a senior cartel member and close friend of Daniel, took multiple bullets and died on the scene, making him the first Kinahan casualty of the feud. 2 other men were wounded by gunfire but survived. The Regency Hotel shooting was an unprecedented act of gangland vengeance. Never before had criminals carried out such a military-style assault in broad daylight at a public event in Ireland. The gunman fled in a van, later found burned out not far away. It became immediately clear that the Hutch side had struck back ferociously for the murder of Gary Hutch. It was widely believed that Daniel Kinahan was the primary target, and David Byrne was killed essentially in his place. The Regency shooting marked a turning point. The Hutch group proved they could hit the Kinahans at the top, and the Kinahans now had a very personal vendetta, the loss of one of their own. Authorities scrambled to respond. Within weeks of the attack, a special crime task force was established to focus on the Kinahan-Hutch feud. This unit, part of the Drugs and Organized Crime Bureau, set about preventing further bloodshed. A daunting task, as the feud was only beginning. Patrick Hutch, younger brother of Gary Hutch, the same Patrick who had been shot in the leg in the earlier failed deal, was charged with the murder of David Byrne. It was alleged Patrick was one of the disguised gunmen at the Regency. His trial at the non-jury Special Criminal Court began in 2018, but dramatically collapsed in February 2019 when the lead detective on the case died by suicide. With critical evidence in disarray, Patrick Hutch's murder charge was dropped. He walked free, and to this day, no one has been convicted of Byrne's murder. Years later, in August 2021, Gary Hutch himself was arrested in Spain on a European warrant related to the Regency attack. He was extradited and tried in Dublin in late 2022. In a verdict that made headlines, Gerry was found not guilty of Byrne's murder. 2 associates, however, were convicted of facilitating the shooting by providing vehicles. Back to 2016, and if the Hutch side thought the Regency attack settled the score for Gary's murder, they were gravely mistaken. The Kinahan cartel responded almost immediately and with brutal clarity. Just 3 days after the Regency shooting, on the evening of the 8th of February 2016, Eddie Hutch Sr. was gunned down in his own home.
They believe a 4-man hit squad was involved in this attack, and it's a relatively short distance away from the Regency Hotel, scene of last Friday's audacious attack, and detectives believe the 2 incidents are linked. Last Friday's murder is understood to have been retaliation for a murder in Spain last September.
Eddie, aged 59, was one of Gary Hutch's brothers. Unlike some of the younger Hutch men, Eddie was not a violent gangster. He was a taxi driver by trade and considered a relatively innocent member of the extended family.
There's a fear in the community. But Mr. Hutch would have been a hard-working guy. He was a taxi man, late 50s, maybe early 60s. Very quiet individual, went about his business, and to my knowledge was not a player in serious crime.
Media described Eddie Hutch as a soft target, killed to send a message. Since the Hutch gunmen who did Regency were in hiding, authorities launched an investigation into Eddie's murder. But yet, as of latest reports, it remains unsolved, though it's widely accepted Kinahan operatives carried out the hit. Each side now had fresh blood to avenge, though notably, from here on, the Kinahan side would do most of the killing, determined to cripple the Hutch faction for good. On the 29th of February 2016, another man was slain in Dublin's Gangland, though this case has a question mark over its connection to the Hutch-Kinahan feud. Vincent Ryan, 25, was shot in the head at close range while sitting in his car outside his partner's home in Finglas. Vincent was the younger brother of the late Alan Ryan, a notorious real IRA militant who had been involved in Dublin's criminal feuds before being killed in 2012. Vincent Ryan's murder was carried out by Kinahan gunmen, and indeed it occurred just weeks into the feud. However, not all sources agree it was part of the Hutch-Kinahan conflict. Some believe Vincent's killing might have stemmed from separate issues. In later court proceedings, it was reported that Kinahan cartel members were behind the hit, though their exact motive remains debated. The bloodletting continued into the spring. On the 23rd of March 2016, Noel king-size Duggan, a 55-year-old close friend of Gary Hutch, was shot dead outside his home in Ratoath, County Meath, north of Dublin. Duggan had just parked in his driveway when assailants opened fire through his car window. Known as king-size for his involvement in cigarette smuggling, Noel Duggan was not a violent gangster, but he was a longtime pal of the Hutch family and had been seen in Gerry's company often. This was yet another blow to Gary Hutch. His inner circle of friends was being picked off. The investigation into Duggan's murder remains open, with no charges filed as of recent reports. April 2016 saw two murders just days apart, one of which tragically involved an innocent bystander. On the 14th April 2016, Martin O'Rourke, 24, was shot dead in broad daylight on Sheriff Street, North Dublin. Martin was a vulnerable young man with no criminal ties. The shooting was a mistaken identity case. The gunman had been hunting a Hutch target in the area and wrongly identified Martin as the target, killing the wrong man. This appalling error highlighted how reckless the feud had become. Even civilians were at risk. Authorities later indicated they believed the shooter was Glenn Clarke, a Kinahan hitman. Clarke would himself meet a violent end. More on him shortly. Less than 2 weeks later, on the 25th of April 2016, the Hutch side suffered another loss. Michael Barr, 35, was shot dead at the Sunset House pub in Summerhill, Dublin. Barr, a known Irish Republican, was a friend to the Hutch group. Crucially, he was suspected of involvement in the Regency hotel attack, likely in supplying the AK-47s used or otherwise facilitating the hit on Byrne. Two masked gunmen stormed the pub and killed him in a swift attack.
A Kinahan gangster and convicted drug dealer with 59 convictions here and in the UK. Christopher Slater's DNA was found on a mask and a runner thrown into the getaway car before it was set on fire. The following day, Slater flew out of Dublin on a long-haul flight to Bangkok via Dubai, which he had booked just 3 hours before on a suspicious mobile phone with no checked or hand luggage. Miss Justice Tara Byrne said today that no rational explanation exists to point to his innocence and that on the DNA evidence alone, the court finds him guilty of murder. Slater is the fourth person convicted following the Garda investigation. His friend and fellow hitman Eamon Cumberton is serving life in prison for the murder, as is the third killer that night, UK hitman David Hunter. A fourth man, Martin Aylmer, was jailed for 6 years for buying the mobile phones used in the murder.
That marked one of the few feud-related murders in which a perpetrator faced full justice. The feud's death toll had climbed steadily. In just 2 months after Regency, Kinahan operatives had killed 5 people. Most were in or around Dublin's north inner city, turning those neighbourhoods into flashpoints. The Hutch side was clearly on the defensive, their ranks dwindling as friends and family fell. On the morning of the 24th of May, 2016, Gareth Hutch, 36, was getting into his car outside the Avondale House flat complex when 2 gunmen approached and opened fire, fatally wounding him. Gareth was a nephew of Gary Hutch, another member of the extended Hutch family targeted. Unlike some of his cousins, Gareth was considered a minor figure in the underworld. The hit was efficient and merciless, carried out in a residential parking lot in front of witnesses. The investigation into Gareth's murder was successful in identifying those responsible. In November 2018, the Special Criminal Court convicted 3 individuals for the killing: Jonathan Keogh, his sister Regina Keogh, and an associate, Thomas Fox. All 3 were found guilty of murder and handed life sentences. Notably, they were an independent gang who undertook the contract, likely paid by or under direction of the Kinahan cartel. The feud raged into the summer. On the 1st of July 2016, David Douglas, 54, was shot dead outside his shop on Bridgefoot Street in Dublin 8. Douglas was a former boxer and longtime criminal associate of the Hutch gang. He had actually survived a shooting attempt in November 2015. However, this time, the gunman finished the job. As Douglas stood outside his wife's shop, which he co-ran, he was shot multiple times. The killing was particularly ruthless, occurring in a busy area in the middle of the day. The investigation into David Douglas's murder eventually led to a major breakthrough. Freddie "Fat" Thompson, a first cousin of Liam Byrne and key Kinahan lieutenant, was arrested and later convicted for orchestrating Douglas's murder. In 2018, Thompson was found guilty and given a life sentence for this crime. His conviction was a significant win for law enforcement. It also confirmed that the Kinahan cartel ordered Douglas's murder. Perhaps the most tragic incident of the feud occurred on the 17th of August 2016, when an innocent holidaymaker was mistaken for a Hutch and killed. Trevor O'Neill, 41, a Dublin City Council worker, was vacationing with his family in Costa de la Calma, near Magaluf in Spain. While walking with his wife and children, a gunman approached and shot Trevor 5 times in front of his family. Trevor was not involved in crime at all. Authorities believed the Kinahan shooter misidentified him as a Hutch family member. The Spanish and Irish police cooperated to investigate. The name Glenn Clarke emerged. Clarke, a Kinahan-affiliated hitman, was believed to be Trevor O'Neill's killer. Justice in this case took an ironic turn. The suspected shooter, Glenn Clarke, was found dead himself just a few months later, in December 2016. Thought to be involved in multiple botched hits, including Martin O'Rourke's. On the 2nd of December 2016, Clarke was discovered dead in a stolen car in Leixlip, County Kildare, shot through the head. There was no sign of another shooter. Intriguingly, the bullet was never found, leading investigators to suspect Clarke accidentally shot himself while handling the gun. However, his family disputes this, implying foul play. A coroner would later return an open verdict in 2020 due to lack of evidence of suicide or murder. Some underworld sources hint that the Kinahans may have executed Clarke for bungling operations, since both O'Rourke and O'Neill were mistaken identities, essentially eliminating their own hitman to cover tracks or out of anger. In any event, Glenn Clarke's demise was counted as a casualty of the feud. As 2016 drew to an end, the Kinahan onslaught persisted. On the 22nd of December 2016, just before Christmas, Noel "Duck Egg" Kirwan, 62, was shot dead in front of his partner outside his home in Clondalkin, West Dublin. Kirwan was a lifelong friend of Gary Hutch. He had no major criminal record beyond minor offences. He was essentially targeted for his association with the Hutch family. In fact, his fate may have been sealed when he was photographed chatting with Gerry at Eddie Hutch's funeral back in February. The Kinahan killers reportedly chose Noel Kirwan as a soft target. The Kirwan murder would be the last feud killing of 2016, capping an incredibly bloody year. Authorities' efforts by this point were in overdrive. Many plots were foiled, firearms were seized, and detectives were closing in on the network behind these shootings. In Noel Kirwan's case, while the triggermen were not immediately caught, investigators managed over time to unravel parts of the conspiracy.
The Kinahan gang had put a tracking device on the 62-year-old grandfather's car, and a senior figure in the organised crime group monitored his movements on a laptop from an apartment at the Beacon South Quarter in Dublin. Declan Brady was in that apartment. His DNA was found on a toothbrush there, and he also drove the other gang leader around in the back of a car with tinted windows. Detective Superintendent Mark O'Neill said the Gardaí had recovered the tracking device and downloaded the information on it, along with phone evidence, CCTV footage and surveillance of Brady and other Kinahan gang members. Brady is the fourth person to be jailed for his role in the murder, along with Martin Aylmer, Jason Keating and Michael Crotty.
The vast majority of victims were connected to the Hutch family, either members, relatives or friends, as the Kinahan side unleashed a campaign of revenge. Only one of the 2016 victims was aligned with the Kinahans, and two innocent men were caught in the crossfire. By 2017, the feud entered a new phase. The initial frenzy of revenge hits had subsided slightly, partly due to intense Garda surveillance and partly because the Hutch side was essentially lying low or had been decimated. But violence still flared. It was a year of cat and mouse between the gangs and law enforcement, with undercover operations, preventing murders, and international hitmen entering the fray. One chilling indicator of the feud's reach behind bars came in March. An inmate named Tom Fox, who was awaiting trial for the 2016 murder of Gareth Hutch, was attacked and stabbed in Mountjoy Prison on 28 March 2017. Another prisoner joined in the assault, and Fox suffered multiple stab wounds. Thankfully, he survived. Fox's role in the Gareth Hutch case made him a target for revenge or silencing. Perhaps the most dramatic police operation of the year took place on the 4th of April 2017, when authorities raided a safe house in West Dublin and arrested 3 Kinahan associates, including a hired hitman, in the safe house, which was owned by a Kinahan-linked man named Eric Fowler. Officers found a cache of weapons and a list of Hutch targets. Among those arrested was Imre Arakas, a 58-year-old Estonian national, infamous as a contract killer known as the Butcher. The Kinahan gang had brought Arakas to Ireland to carry out hits. However, it appears someone tipped off the police about the plot, possibly Eric Fowler himself. Fowler's alleged cooperation with authorities may have saved lives, but it marked him for death by his own cartel. We will revisit Fowler's fate later. A long-time Hutch associate named James Mago Gately had wisely fled Dublin and was hiding out in Belfast. Gately was extremely high on the Kinahan hit list. They blamed him for having a role in the Regency hotel attack, although he was never charged for it. On the 10th of May 2017, Gately drove down to Dublin, perhaps thinking it was safe. As he parked at a Topaz petrol station in North Dublin, a gunman in a black Lexus pulled up and opened fire, pumping 5 bullets into Gately's car. Miraculously, Gately survived. He had the foresight to wear a bulletproof vest, which absorbed 4 shots to his chest. 1 bullet hit his jaw, seriously injuring him, but not killing him. The attack was the second attempt on Gately's life in 6 months. The investigation revealed a far-reaching conspiracy to murder Gately, orchestrated by Kinahan leaders using encrypted messaging. Several men were later arrested and prosecuted. In 2020, Cowell Smith was convicted of attempted murder for being the gunman who shot Gately. An accomplice, Gary McAreevy, was convicted of helping burn out the getaway car. That same year, authorities nabbed Peadar Keating, a senior Kinahan operative who admitted to directing the activities of the hit team targeting Gately. He was effectively the on-ground coordinator who recruited Arakas and others. Keating received 11 years in prison. Despite proactive policing, the feud still saw deadly success for the Kinahan side in 2017. 3 murders that year are attributed to the feud, each victim connected to the Hutch group in some way. On the 31st of May 2017, Michael Keogh, 37, was shot dead in his car in an underground car park on Dorset Street, Dublin.
The body of the latest victim of the ongoing murderous feud between 2 criminal gangs in Dublin was removed this afternoon from the place where he died. Michael Keogh was found by a council worker, shot dead here in an underground car park in Sheridan Court at around 10 to 10 this morning. Originally from Sean McDermott Street, Michael Keogh grew up in Dublin's north inner city. He had just started a new job in construction and was on his way to work early this morning when he was ambushed. The 37-year-old father of two lived here in the flat complex beside the underground car park. He was shot a number of times and was found lying across the front seats of the Volkswagen car, the car keys still in his hand. Gardaí believe Michael Keogh was shot dead at least 2 hours before his body was discovered. A grey Opel Astra, believed to have been used as the getaway car, was found on fire earlier at around 7:30 this morning on nearby Clonliffe Avenue. Fitted with false number plates, it had been stolen last month. A gun has also been found.
This case is complex. Keogh had Kinahan links, but was also friendly with certain Hutch associates. Notably, Michael was the brother of Jonathan and Regina Keogh, the siblings later convicted of killing Gareth Hutch. Michael himself had been seen with Hutch-aligned figures like Jason Buda Molyneux, a prominent Hutch ally. It's believed the Kinahan cartel executed Michael Keogh, fearing he might flip allegiance or because of those friendships. Yet authorities haven't fully ruled out other possibilities. Keogh had various underworld connections and could have been killed by another rival or even set up by someone on the Hutch side as a double cross. Still, the dominant theory is that Keogh was punished by the Kinahans for perceived disloyalty. As of recent reports, no one has been charged in his murder. On the 22nd of October 2017, Jamie Tig Ennis, 24, was shot dead outside a house on Moatview Avenue, Coolock.
The body of the latest Gangland murder victim in Dublin was removed today for a post-mortem from the place where he was shot dead. Shocked and saddened family and friends were here at the scene to grieve and pay their respects. 24-year-old Jamie Ty Ennis was chatting with a group of male and female friends on the footpath here on Moatview Avenue in Coolock at 2 this morning when a gunman shot him in the back of the head. The getaway car, a black Audi A3, was found burnt out in Finglas. Gardaí are appealing for people with information to come forward and are trying to identify and speak to the people who were with the victim when he died.
He was known to police with prior assault and firearms charges. Jamie was an associate of the Hutch crew. He was friends with Jason Molyneux and others. His killing mirrored Michael Keogh's in its rationale, believed to be carried out by the Kinahan cartel to eliminate anyone affiliated with the Hutch group. However, Jamie had a broad array of criminal contacts. Authorities could not definitively pin his murder on the Hutch feud alone, leaving open the possibility of other underworld motives. To date, insufficient evidence links the Hutch group directly to Jamie's death, so it stands as presumably a one-way hit by Kinahan interests. No charges have been brought. On the 1st of December 2017, Cain McCormack, 24, was found shot in the head in a field in Walterstown, County Meath.
The body of the 24-year-old male was discovered in a remote field in Walterstown, near the Meath-Kildare border, yesterday at 11 a.m. He was subsequently identified as Cain McCormack from Clonee in County Meath. They say Cain McCormack parked his 04D silver Peugeot 307 in a supermarket car park in Clonee village at 5 p.m. on Friday. There he got into a black saloon-type car that drove towards Dunboyne. Shortly after 6 p.m, Gardaí found a black Audi saloon car on fire at Meekstown Cottages.
He had gone missing the day before after telling his partner he was off to meet someone, and when he didn't return, they grew worried. The murder of Cain McCormack was particularly significant in that he was the son of a previous feud victim. Cain's father was Noel Kirwan, who had been killed 1 year earlier. It's thought that Cain wanted revenge for his dad's assassination and might have been plotting against the Kinahans. The Kinahan gang appears to have struck first, viewing Cain as a potential threat. Cain had been officially warned by police that his life was in danger, a common Garda practice when someone is on a hit list. He also had some involvement with dissident Republicans and was caught with ammunition weeks prior, which suggested he was planning something significant. 2 men were arrested, but both were released without charge leaving the case unsolved. By the end of 2017, the Hutch side had not managed to kill any further Kinahan members since the Regency, aside from possibly Michael Keogh, but he was actually linked to both gangs. Authorities set up surveillance on likely targets and hitmen, foiling plots such as the Gary Hanley attempt in November. Another Hutch associate, he had multiple tracking devices found on his car, tipping off police that an attempt on his life was imminent. In an operation, authorities arrested several men in the act of planning Hanley's murder.
The plan was to shoot and kill Hanley at his home on the 6th of November 2017, but the Garda's Drugs and Organised Crime Unit had the gang under surveillance. Dean Howe was one of the supervisors of the operation. He took instructions from those at the top of the Kinahan organisation and directed those on the front line of the murder attempt. He was recorded chastising the getaway driver Joseph Kelly, telling him he had effed up and asking, "What are you getting paid for?" "We all have our jobs to do," he told Kelly, "but we had to do your job." 2 days later, he again warned Kelly, "We don't want any silly mistakes, right?" He later praised the getaway driver, saying, "Good man, you kept your hood up and your face down." He's been jailed for 12 years, Luke Wilson for 11 years, and his uncle Alan Wilson is serving 6 years in prison.
A few more violent episodes would occur in early 2018 before things truly simmered down. And importantly, some unfinished business remained. The Kinahans still hadn't gotten to their most elusive target, Gary Hutch himself, nor his brother Patsy Hutch, both of whom were in hiding abroad or under heavy guard. On the 20th of January 2018, Derek Coakley Hutch, 27, was shot dead around 3 p.m. while sitting in a parked car beside Clover Hill Prison in West Dublin. He had just visited his incarcerated brother, and along with 2 friends. As the 2 friends stepped out of the vehicle briefly, a gunman struck. Derek was shot multiple times in the head at close range and died instantly. The attackers then burned out their getaway cars nearby. Derek Coakley Hutch was a nephew of Gary Hutch and had been warned by police that his life was in danger, like so many others on the Hutch side. Despite over 450 lines of inquiry, no one has been charged with Derek's murder. It is presumed to be another Kinahan-ordered hit. Then, on the 30th of January 2018, just 10 days after Derek's killing, Jason Molyneux, 27, was shot dead at the James Larkin House Flats on Dublin's North Strand. Jason was a well-known street criminal. Reports say he had 122 prior convictions for various offences. He was also a trusted Hutch associate and a close friend of Derek Coakley Hutch. In fact, on the night he was murdered, Jason had just returned from Derek's wake. He had been paying respects to his fallen friend. As he arrived near his home, a 2-man hit team ambushed him, shooting him multiple times. Jason tried to flee, but collapsed and died from his wounds. The killers fled in a van, which they later attempted to burn near the East Link Bridge. The timing strongly indicates Kinahan retaliation. They struck Jason possibly because he was likely to retaliate for Derek's death, or simply because he was another key Hutch loyalist. To date, no arrests have been made public in his case either. With most of Gary Hutch's close allies now deceased or in hiding, the Kinahan gang turned their gaze to a prime target who had remarkably survived thus far: Patsy Hutch, Gerry's older brother. Patsy, in his late 50s, was not involved in crime himself. He was a quiet family man. But tragically for him, he was the father of Gary Hutch, whose murder started the feud. The Kinahans likely saw Patsy's assassination as a way to psychologically torture Gerry and perhaps draw him out. Patsy had already survived at least 3 attempts on his life and had been repeatedly warned by authorities of credible threats. He took precautions. Living in Dublin's north inner city, he refused to be driven out of his home turf. But he knew danger lurked. In early March 2018, a meticulous Kinahan plot to finally get Patsy was underway, and it was only stopped thanks to extraordinary police work. On the 10th of March, 2018, Garda surveillance units were monitoring a team of suspected Kinahan operatives in Dublin. Acting on intelligence, armed officers raided a van in a car park on Gardner Street at 8 a.m. Subsequent investigation confirmed the plan. The hit team intended to cause a ruckus to lure Patsy out of his house and then gun him down. On the 27th of March, not long after the foiled van plot, ominous graffiti reading, "Patsy dies, feud ends," appeared on walls near Patsy's home. Authorities suspected this was another attempt to flush Patsy out. In July 2019, Gary Thompson and Glenn Thompson and Robert Brown, an ex-soldier who served in Afghanistan, all pleaded guilty and were each jailed for 11 to 12.5 years for their roles in the Patsy Hutch plot. In June 2020, Michael Burns, Stephen Curtis, and Kieran O'Driscoll, part of a second layer of the conspiracy, were sentenced for planning to murder Patsy Hutch. Burns got 9 years, Curtis and O'Driscoll 5 years each. Evidence showed Burns communicated via encrypted phone-giving orders. Curtis had sourced burner phones and attended meetings. O'Driscoll was to be the lookout on Patsy's street. In August 2020, 2 more associates, Patrick Curtis and Mohammed Smew, were jailed for 10 and 7 years respectively. They were part of a subcell under Kinahan command, involved in vehicles and planning. The unravelling of the Patsy Hutch plot was arguably the biggest victory for law enforcement during the feud. It prevented what would have likely been a gruesome public assassination, and it put a significant number of Kinahan operatives behind bars. Following the foiled Patsy Hutch attack in March, the Kinahan side essentially had no prominent Hutch targets left in Dublin to hit. Gerry Hutch was abroad, Patsy was now under heavy guard, Gary Hutch was long dead. Most of Gerry's nephews and friends were dead or in hiding. Still, 2 more killings in late 2018 have possible links to the feud, though by this time, motives grew muddled with other criminal feuds. On the 15th of November 2018, Clive Staunton, 50, was shot dead outside his home in Leixlip, County Kildare.
The murder of a man in County Kildare last night is linked to the Hutch-Kinahan feud.
The body of the man Gardaí believed to be the latest victim of the ongoing Hutch-Kinahan feud was this afternoon removed from the place where he was targeted for assassination. 50-year-old Clive Staunton arrived at his home here at Gleneaston Way in Leixlip last night, where his killers were waiting. A gunman first fired at least 3 shots into Mr. Staunton's van. The bullet holes were still visible in the driver's window. And although he managed to get out and tried to escape, he collapsed and was shot at least 2 more times as he lay on the ground. The suspected getaway car, an old-style silver Volvo S40, was found burnt out over 30 kilometres away, here in Manor Kilbride in County Wicklow.
Clive Staunton was distantly related by marriage to the Hutch family and was originally from Dublin's inner city before moving to Kildare. He had minor past offences, but wasn't a major criminal. Some arrests were made in this case, but as of recent reports, no one has been charged. The Staunton murder still remains somewhat ambiguous. On the 22nd of December 2018, Eric Fowler, 34, was shot dead outside his home in Blakestown. 2 gunmen waited for Fowler to come outside. When he did, they sprinted up and shot him multiple times in the head before fleeing. A burnt-out Volkswagen Jetta was found shortly after. Fowler had been formally warned by authorities that his life was in danger. His murder is interesting because Eric Fowler was a known Kinahan associate. In fact, he allegedly tipped off police about Imre Arakas in April 2017. Many believe Fowler was executed by the Kinahan cartel itself for betraying them. However, authorities also considered that Fowler's death might be connected to separate local feuds in West Dublin. As of recent reports, nobody has been charged, and police stated they have no suspect solid enough to charge for Fowler's murder. By early 2019, the shootings had largely subsided. As the feud cooled, law enforcement intensified efforts to bring down the Kinahan cartel as a whole, recognizing it as the larger menace behind the violence. In 2019, there were no confirmed Feud murders, but at least one attempted murder linked to the gangs. On the 6th of March 2019, Lee Boylan, 24, was shot 3 times while driving his van in Dublin and narrowly survived.
Alan Graham of Davin Gardens in Limerick pleaded guilty to helping a criminal gang in its attempt to murder Lee Boylan in Dublin in March 2019.
Alan Graham was jailed today for his role in the attempt to murder a rival gang member here in West Dublin just over 2 years ago. 3 months earlier, Eric Fowler was shot dead in Blakestown in West Dublin. The organised crime gang he was with blamed, without evidence and wrongly, Lee Boylan. They set up a surveillance operation on the 24-year-old, and on the 6th of March 2019, Alan Graham drove their gunman here to Blakestown Road, where Boylan was sitting in his van.
Boylan was known as a Kinahan associate. The shooting circumstances were puzzling. It happened near where Eric Fowler had been killed 2 months prior. It's unclear whether Boylan was targeted by the Hutch side, as an act of revenge, or by his own side in some falling out. Boylan suffered life-changing injuries, but lived. Later, a getaway driver, Alan Graham, was convicted and jailed for 10 years for his role in this attempted murder. The Hutch family emerged from the feud battered. Many family members were dead, and many who lived had either fled Ireland or faced their own legal troubles. Gary Hutch, having lost several nephews and friends, managed to stay alive, reportedly spending time in Spain and Turkey under the radar. However, Irish authorities were still pursuing him for the Regency attack. In August 2021, Spanish police arrested Gary Hutch on Ireland's request. He was extradited to Ireland to stand trial at the Special Criminal Court for the murder of David Byrne. This trial grabbed national attention in late 2022. In a twist, Gary Hutch was acquitted in April 2023. The judges ruled there was insufficient evidence that he was one of the 6 Regency shooters, especially after a key state witness, a former associate who turned, gave inconsistent testimony. Gary Hutch's acquittal was a remarkable outcome. It essentially closed the chapter on direct accountability for the Regency Hotel shooting. Upon release, Gerry returned to his community in Dublin. In an astonishing move that would have been unthinkable at the feud's peak, he ran for political office in late 2024, standing as an independent candidate in the Dublin Central constituency. Capitalising on a kind of folk hero status in some deprived inner-city areas, Hutch garnered significant votes, a protest vote by marginalised communities, and narrowly missed winning a parliamentary seat. Post-2018, the Kinahan cartel faced mounting heat from international law enforcement. The feud had drawn enormous attention to the Kinahans, painting a target on their backs. In January 2019, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, the Kinahan No. 2 man, was arrested in the UK. He later pleaded guilty to large-scale drug trafficking and in 2022 was sentenced by a UK court to 21 years in prison for smuggling drugs and firearms. Taking Bomber out was a huge blow, as he was effectively running the UK end of the cartel and was believed to have sponsored multiple murders. The big hammer came on 12th April 2022, when the United States Department of State and Department of Treasury announced sanctions and rewards on the Kinahan cartel leadership. The US, in coordination with Irish authorities, offered up to $5 million for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Christy Kinahan Sr., Daniel Kinahan, or Christopher Kinahan Jr. They also sanctioned 7 key individuals and 3 related businesses, effectively freezing any assets and forbidding US entities from dealing with them. In June 2023, Liam Byrne, brother of David Byrne, was arrested in Spain on a UK warrant related to gun trafficking. Byrne had fled Ireland earlier when the net closed in. His arrest was significant, although he has already been released on house arrest. Daniel Kinahan had been living in Dubai, believing himself untouchable. But after the US sanctions, UAE authorities reportedly became less hospitable. In 2022 and 2023, some Kinahan assets and businesses in Dubai were exposed or raided. A key associate, Johnny Morrissey, was arrested in Spain in September 2022 on money laundering charges. By 2023, the Kinahan presence in Dubai was on shaky ground, with reports suggesting they were lying low as international pressure mounted. Despite these blows, intelligence indicated that Kinahan operations continued to function in the shadows. As late as August 2022, multi-million euro drug shipments linked to Spanish Kinahan associates were still being intercepted. However, it's widely believed the sanctions and arrests have significantly curtailed the Kinahans' power. No longer can Daniel pop up at boxing events or in public. He's a wanted man internationally. By 2025, the Hutch-Kinahan feud has largely calmed. There have been no new murders directly attributed to the feud since 2018